Is this the example of what the Freethought community is? Boxed into your way of thinking, refusing to hear any alternative views? And rather than even consider an alternative view, you cast it off. You try to categorize it as religion. What's up? It's another Curious Minds podcast. I'm here at the Christian Student Center at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. It is a rare, cloudy-ish day in Albuquerque, so you know something crazy is about to go on. Frank Turek asked one time, he asked a crowd, how many of you have non-Christian friends or atheistic friends? I don't remember which he said. And a good portion of the crowd put their hand up, as would I, and I'm making more of them. And then he asked a follow-up question. Okay, how many of your unbelieving friends would you say are diligently pursuing finding out the truth of whether or not God exists? So 99% of the time, people say, no, that doesn't define who I'm thinking of, or it doesn't define them to say they are diligently pursuing the ultimate truth to discover whether or not God exists. Usually it's a deconversion that embitters them toward the question of God's existence, and they live, as they perceive it, a very free life in the rejection of God and of religion. But religion's this byproduct. It's secondary, really. It's secondary to acknowledging the truth, because we ought to follow the truth regardless of where it leads us. And if it leads us to behave a certain way in order to be consistent with that truth, then so be it. You want to call it religion? Whatever. Call it life. Call it who I am, what I see worthwhile of doing. A lot of what I do is not outright religious stuff, but a lot of what I do is due to the passion of wanting to live out the truth of who I see God to be, and the message that Jesus came and sent his disciples with. I see the importance of carrying that forward. And I've had reminders of that this week. Reminders of the power, the freedom behind the name of Jesus. It causes some to scoff and mock and run the other way. And it causes some to be healed, to feel freedom in their soul, to recognize salvation in their spirit. It causes them to feel welcome in a world that's rejected them, and to feel fulfilled in a world that's taken everything from them. An odd thing if this Jesus didn't really exist the way that we think he existed, or if the resurrection didn't happen, or if God didn't have some authority over him. Odd things taking place in the name of Jesus if the physical world is all that exists. Anyway, the significance of these things ought to cause non-believers to really take pause and pay attention to the message, just in case it's true. And if it's not, and you've investigated authentically, then go on your merry way. But I'm convinced that if you investigate it authentically, carefully, with truth, with the right sources, with an open heart and open mind, you are going to see something. You're going to see truth. The problem is, like Frank Turek discovered in doing his audience survey, most people aren't willing to do that. Most people are so afraid of being inconvenienced, it's almost as if they would rather die than risk changing some long-standing belief that they've had. As I've asked before, what are you afraid of? Why are people afraid of engaging in serious dialogue on these things? Is it going to waste their time? If I follow you for the entire day, for the entire week, how many time wasters am I going to see? And yet these people are afraid of this so-called time waster invading their life, invading their freedoms. Is it really a time waster when it's potentially the one thing that your soul's been craving? The one satisfaction that you've been looking in diverse places for? Is that really a time waster? I wouldn't think so. I think the time wasters are those things that you put in place that distract you from facing the fact of who you are and the fears that you genuinely have in life. We are becoming experts on distracting ourselves, on avoiding the tough issues that we ought to be facing, the tough questions that we ought to be engaging with. We're expert distractors. We come up with our simple resolution, and then when somebody else offers us an alternative or questions us on that, are we afraid to dialogue? Are we afraid to figure out how the other person thinks because we're so worried that it might threaten our comfortable thoughts? And this brings me to the example from last weekend. Again, the group will remain nameless, person will remain nameless, but it was a group on population control, which splinters out into a few different directions with how many resources do we have on this earth? What kind of resources should we be pouring into the poorer places? What's more preferable, an abortion or adoption? Should we limit the number of children that we're having? Adopt rather than have our own children? So that then this swelling population of Earth can be under control and our resources can be preserved, global warming can be restricted, and we'll be able to afford better lives for our children going forward. That's the grand vision. Okay, cool. Present your position. Great. Very well done piece. But what's the problem? Most of these guys who saw this, who interacted with this, are never going to seriously engage with what the other side may want to say. Is there an alternative position? I'm pretty sure there is. I'm not the person to talk about it, but I'm pretty sure there's an alternative position that would say we're doing just fine, resources-wise. I don't know. Again, I'm not promoting that position or the other position, but I'm just saying, can they interact respectfully with that other position? And I think the sign that I received afterwards was that a lot of these people would not be willing to engage in an alternative position. There was a matter of groupthink taking place. It's very predictable the types of things people that run in groups like this are going to think like. They're going to hate President Trump. Again, not a huge supporter, not somebody who rejects him. But I think it's a position, an office that needs to be respected. That's about all I'll say about that. But groupthink, if it comes from Trump, if it comes from a conservative party, you must hate everything associated with it. That's not the type of open, free thought that I'm used to hearing atheists say that they have. So the real subject that pinpointed this was on abortion. And I wanted to learn the other person's position. Because nobody, conservatives also, let me call them out, nobody's intending to be a baby killer, okay? Nobody's intending to do that. Nobody's intending to remove the rights of humans to do this. We have a disagreement on what constitutes a baby, a living human baby. Because we all agree that a living human baby deserves rights and deserves protection. All right? So conservatives also back off a little bit, listen to the other side as well, seek to understand them, which is what I was engaging in this conversation to do. This person was very against religion overall and something specific from Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism teaches not to use contraceptives because they believe that that's interfering with the birth of a baby, which is sort of akin to an abortion. It's been outlawed by the church. That rule from the Catholic Church really disgusted this individual. And so, again, I don't think I take that position of the Catholic Church. But I want to understand why they take that position. And I want to help this other person understand why they take that position. So I said, you understand why they don't want abortion at that period, or why they don't want to use contraceptives, especially certain types of contraceptives. They believe that something has come to life that at that moment has the rights of a human being, and that you shouldn't put it to death. If they think that way, are they right to say, no, we shouldn't do that? Yeah. So rather than insult them for simply being religious fanatics who don't think whatsoever, try to understand why they may take the position they take. And again, without endorsing the position, you can at least approach them with understanding. So I asked this person, what's your position on it? When do you think the human life begins? And he said, when the baby in the womb is viable, meaning when that baby can survive outside of the womb, it can then be defined as a human. And at that point, at approximately 22 weeks, an abortion should not take place. And really, that's a more conservative position than some atheists will take. Shouldn't just categorize atheists, agnostics as well. Some say right up to birth. There's even some extremists saying later on, up to however many months after birth. But that's a real fringe, and I wouldn't categorize anybody I meet into that generalization. So he said viability, 22 weeks. I said, okay. And again, I wasn't arguing that he was wrong. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's not. But I said, and I stand by this because of what little research I've done in this topic, this is something that was definitely highlighted from Christian and non-Christian authors. We do not have a conclusive view of when the human life begins. Is it when cells can reproduce and all the genetic material is present inside the cell? Maybe that's what it is. What really changes after that? Maybe it's when all the genetic material is present. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it's when the cells reach a point where they're no longer totipotent cells. They are now specified as the cells with a certain bodily function. Maybe that's the point. Maybe. But maybe it's when there's response to stimulus in the fetus. Just respond. You can prod it with something and it will react. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's when it has blood. Maybe it's when there's a heartbeat. Maybe it's when there's a brain present, or nerves, or the first thought, which we don't know when that is. So it might be viability, like you said, but there's also a good chance that it's not. And science can't say, oh, we have it figured out. 22 weeks, when it becomes a living human baby, fully endowed with rights. I hope they're right, but chances aren't super good that they're right. So by pointing out alternative possibilities to this person, do you know what his reaction was? He said, that's just a religious response. That's not science. That's religion. I had to pause and say, hold on, what did I say that was religious? I'm saying that this science does not point us to when the human life begins. You're the one being dogmatic about, no, this has to be the point when life begins. Science doesn't say that. You're playing make-believe with science. Refusing to hear, you don't even have to believe him, but you're refusing to hear alternative perspectives. You're refusing to understand alternative perspectives. You're refusing to understand those who hold contrary views. The very thing you accuse the religious of doing. Is this the example of what the Freethought community is? Boxed into your way of thinking, refusing to hear any alternative views? And rather than even consider an alternative view, you cast it off. You try to categorize it as religion. I didn't say anything religious. I said, what if it's not? What if it's this other point? What if it's when it has blood? It's not a God said it, therefore it's true kind of argument. It's we're looking at science and science is inconclusive. We're struggling to define what human life is. We don't agree on that, and that's why we're in this mess on this issue. And the thing that's going to make it get messier is this response where you refuse to hear the other side. You refuse to understand another person's perspective. Maybe if you did understand, take the time to listen to it and understand why they think the way they think, we wouldn't have the type of violence and vitriol going on over such issues. Take some time to get with somebody that thinks a little bit differently than you. Hold tight to the worldview that you see as true, but in the first 5 or 10 seconds of conversation, don't cast the person off as some wacko nut job spouting religious jargon. Whatever he's saying, and I've said this before, whatever he's saying, he's got some kind of reason for holding to what he holds to. The man holding to viability as the point when life begins, he has a reason for holding to that. He thinks it's the best interpretation of the evidence, and I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is him believing that science has made up its mind, he's on the side of science, anybody that disagrees with him is on the side of religion, and therefore is wrong. Well, guess what? Somebody can be on the side of religion and not be wrong. That is a genetic fallacy, simple genetic fallacy to say, if that came from religion, it must be wrong. Explaining its origin does not explain its falsehood, which means that I have to admit that something an atheist claims might be right. Human life begins at viability? He might be right. Do I think he's right? I'm not going to lock myself into a certain position. Like I said, probably not, but maybe. Could I interact with somebody like that and hear his position? Sure. Can I test the strength of his position? Sure. And that's what I did by asking, how do you know it's that point in life, or that point in the womb, and not the point where they have blood, or not the point when they have response to stimulus, or specifically defined cells to fulfill their function? The real easy thing to do? Boy, if I was an atheist, it'd be so easy to explain myself. All you have to do is cast everything else off as religion and claim to have science on your side. Boom, done. All you have to do is let everybody else kind of do the thinking for you. Oh, that's what religious people do, huh? Do they? All of them? Have you talked to all of them? That's all they do? So it seems like being a religious person doesn't box you into a certain mode of thinking, does it? Not on issues like this. You can be religious and open to the interpretations of science. Yeah. What happened to Galileo was not an indictment against all of religion, against all belief in God. Those present were the ones guilty. I'm not held guilty for the condemnation of Galileo. You can't categorize all Christians, all religious people, into a box so that you can conveniently dismiss anything they say as religious jargon. Another thing that someone said that is an example of their anger against religion is the reason that Christians teach this or that, in this case, having children, is to stuff their pockets with money. Wow. Probably the weakest argument I've heard in weeks, trying to explain away why Christians do what they do. Why do Christians evangelize? Well, they're just trying to stuff their pockets. They know that when their church grows, it's going to get richer. Really? And they know that by having babies, their church is going to get more populated and they'll be richer. Really? That's a pretty poor method of financial planning. The entire lesson that we had that day was about how having too many children too young actually causes you to be in more poverty than having a few children a little bit later. So churches are just trying to stuff their pockets. We bring in new believers who we've just evangelized to, people come into the faith, and now a few of them join our church. Does that stuff our pockets? Chances are it's going to cost more to support that new believer than they'll ever contribute to the church. And if they contribute, great. Who's getting the money? The person who did the evangelizing? No. The pastor? Probably not. The pastor's often not the one going out doing the evangelizing. If I'm going out to the University of New Mexico and I have the blessing to see someone come to Christ and they want to join a fellowship, if they join the Christian Student Center here, I'm not getting a dime from them. Nobody here is getting a dime from them. We don't charge for anything here. But guess what? People love them. Huh. Have you ever thought about that? You who think religion's the source of poison in our world. You ever thought that maybe the love of God has come alive in people, and if there is no God by your perspective, there's at least a love that's come alive in people, and it causes them to pay attention to people, to treat them with dignity and respect. And as they're brought into the fold, into the fellowship, they are made to belong, they're celebrated for who they are, they're caused to live a more fulfilling and dignified life according to the law of love toward God and love toward people. Such a bad thing, isn't it? Such a bad thing. What if they go out and do the same? Oh, what if they do? They're not going to make a dime off the person they witness to either. It's pretty ironic that these atheistic and non-Christian organizations, they often charge member fees. They often solicit support. Dan Barker's Freedom from Religion Foundation. Do you think they're asking for money? Oh yeah. Am I going to say, well, the only reason they want to spread the message of atheism is so that Dan Barker can stuff his pockets with cash? No, I'm pretty sure Dan Barker doesn't need money from that source. He's a good enough author. He's got other ways to make his money. He's at a point in life where he's probably not desperate for it. Would he like to get richer? Probably. Do I think that's the sole motive behind what he does? I have no evidence for that. So if I'm not going to categorize Dan Barker a bitter atheist, why should an atheist categorize Christians as those who want to stuff their pockets by spreading their message? It'd be a little more fair to say they're just horribly mistaken spreading a message that they think is true. They think they do it for the right reasons, but I have my doubts. That's a whole lot more fair than saying, Christians are just out to stuff their pockets. Go out here to the University of New Mexico sometime, and especially if there are evangelists present, if there are Christian groups meeting on campus or something like that, and if you're a doubter, a skeptic, somebody that believes that religion's just out to stuff their pockets, go spend some time out there with some of the Christians and see. What are they doing to stuff their pockets? What are they doing to promote some false agenda? I haven't seen one iota of that yet. We normally have 7 or 8 Christian organizations out there on Wednesdays reaching out to the students. Guess what? It's costing them money to do that. They have glossy flyers that they're giving out. They have a banner that somebody had to pay for. They have candy, or if you're Calvary ABQ, they're giving out coffees. I don't know how much those cost because I don't drink coffee, but they might be giving away $10-15 every time they go out there on a Wednesday. Somebody's supporting that, and they're not expecting anything in return from these students. They're not saying, hey, sure hope you pay me back in time. They don't care about that. They're willing to sacrifice the money because they care about the souls of the people. All right, you know what? I'm going to stop at that. So this has been Curious Minds. This is Evan Van Sickle at the Christian Student Center at the University of New Mexico. Thank you for listening in to this little spontaneous rant on meeting with atheists, and the reasonability of the Christian faith, on the ability to converse well with those who hold contrary views, and my little spat on the indictment against the way that many non-Christians and bitter atheists think. Hope you'll catch me next week, or down the road, or come see me in person, or find me on campus at a philosophy booth or something like that, and we can have some good conversation. We can think well about the things that matter most. May God bless and guide you.